1999's Office Space, directed by Mike Judge, follows the story of Peter Gibbons, a disgruntled computer programmer working for the tech company Initech under his pretentious boss Bill Lumbergh, who he absolutely despises. The film portrays the nature of working at an office in a satirical and comedic tone, whilst making vague yet profound statements against the establishment, corporation, and of course, capitalism. Office Space follows the series of what I like to call fuck office movies that came out in the 90s and the early 2000s. You know, movies like Fight Club, The Matrix, American Psycho, the lesser known yet profound Falling Down, and of course, Office Space. Despite the grim nature of these movies, the late 90s and the early 2000s were actually a period of economic prosperity. The globalization policies implemented by President Bill Clinton were at a full swing. Productivity growth resulting from technological investments, mainly computers and software, was at a rate of 2.5%, jumping from 1.5% from the last 5 years. So productivity was high, employment was high, wages were high, all of this were good, but it also left a lot of people, especially men, with feelings of existential dread. Like, is this what life is going to be like from now on? Sitting in a cubicle staring at a screen for the next 50 years? Is this the best that life has to offer? Now, I was fairly young when I first watched Office Space, almost too young to understand what was going on, but even then I remember thinking how ridiculous some things were. Like getting this worked up over a cover sheet to the point you get told off by 3 different people, being possessive and protective over a stapler, losing your mind over a printed paper jam. Like, this can't be real. This has to be satire, right? But then I read late anthropologist and anarchist David Graeber's book, Bullshit Jobs, A Theory, following his 2013 essay on the phenomenon of bullshit jobs, and it all made sense. It was like the missing pieces of a puzzle finally falling back in place. Rewatching Office Space after reading Bullshit Jobs, I started to see this movie with a different lens, realizing that not only was this movie a satire, but this was actually a pretty accurate reflection of the nature of work. So, without further ado, hi everyone. So, it's a new year, and with the new year comes new jobs. I'm sure a lot of us are very much looking forward to going back to work after the holiday season. Some of us are probably starting new jobs or are going back to school in hopes of finally landing a decent job. But whatever it is, let's face it, very few of us are actually looking forward to it. Jobs seems to be a topic that almost everybody has an opinion on because it affects everyone. Therefore, it tends to be one of the main points during every election. It's hard not to find a candidate that is running for office to not have any policies on creating new jobs or making more jobs or bringing back jobs.
I'm going to bring back millions of jobs.
Today, we learned that in March, our economy created 431,000 jobs.
But while more jobs seems to be something that both the Democrats and the Republicans can agree on, no one ever seems to question whether or not those jobs are actually meaningful or contribute to anything useful in society. People all over the world, not just Americans, have a complicated relationship with work. For most of us, it's the thing that gives our lives meaning. It's what defines us, rules us, governs us. It's something that we spend most of our lives doing. You know, meet somebody new and 9 times out of 10, the first thing that they ask you is, "So, what do you do?" But yet at the same time, very few of us actually like what we're doing. While there definitely are some of us that outright hate our jobs and dread waking up every morning, most of us, I would say, have the vaguest feeling of dissent that something is deeply wrong with how our society has been built around work. We may not have the words to express or articulate what that feeling exactly is, but it is reflected all over our media, in movies, in TV shows, and even in children's cartoons.
Coming to bed, honey?
Yes, dear.
In this video, I want to attempt to articulate what this feeling is, how and why this came about, and to help me do so, I'll be referring to late David Graeber's 2018 book, Bullshit Jobs, A Theory. Late anthropologist and activist David Graeber's book, Bullshit Jobs, A Theory, follows from his 2013 essay on the phenomenon of bullshit jobs, where he wrote about jobs that are effectively meaningless, contribute nothing to society, yet are highly paid, that exist just to keep the wheels turning. His 2013 essay went viral almost immediately after it was published, has been translated into at least a dozen languages. At some point, quotes from this essay were put up on London's Underground Tube as means of a peaceful protest. Reba received thousands of testimonies from people who resonated with his essay, to the point British polling agency YouGov had enough data to conduct a poll where they found that 37% of British workers think that their jobs are meaningless. 37%, that's over 1/3 of workers that believe that their jobs shouldn't exist. Now, this poll was conducted back in 2015, but I imagine that number would be much higher now. Some other polls, like this one mentioned in the book from Netherlands, reported as high as 40% of workers who reported their jobs to be meaningless. So nearly half of all workers think that their jobs simply shouldn't exist, yet they still continue to wake up every morning, spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week on what is essentially pointless. This, I think, is a national crisis that people are not talking enough about. But before I get into it, let's just clear up some stuff and clarify some things. Reba's essay on the phenomenon of bullshit jobs starts by referencing one of the most influential economists of all time, John Maynard Keynes. In his 1930 essay, Economic Possibilities for Our Grandchildren, Keynes predicted that by the end of the century, technological advancements would allow the working week to be cut into less than half, 3-hour shifts or 15-hour work weeks. Now, Keynes, to an extent, was not wrong. We have long achieved the 15-hour work week, but we have done so in a perverse way. As Reba states in his essay, more and more employees find themselves working 40 or even 50-hour weeks on paper, but effectively working 15 hours just as Keynes predicted, since the rest of their time is spent organizing or attending motivational seminars, updating their Facebook profiles, or downloading TV box sets.
You see, what we're actually trying to do here is we're trying to get a feel for how people spend their day at work. So if you would you walk us through a typical day for you?
Yeah.
Great.
Well, I generally come in at least 15 minutes late. I use the side door. That way Lumberg can't see me. And after that, I just sort of space out for about an hour. Till I'm finished.
Space out?
Yeah, I just stare at my desk. But it looks like I'm working. I do that for probably another hour after lunch, too. I'd say in a given week, I probably only do about 15 minutes of real, actual work.
This is what Reba calls bullshit jobs, a form of paid employment that is so completely pointless, unnecessary, or pernicious that even the employee cannot justify its existence, even though, as part of the conditions of employment, the employee feels obliged to pretend that this is not the case. It's as if someone were out there making up pointless jobs just for the sake of keeping us all working. To understand what sorts of jobs that I'm talking about here, Reba suggests doing a bit of a thought experiment. Think of the kind of jobs that would cause the society to fall apart if they were to vanish tomorrow. Teachers, nurses, garbage collectors, cleaners, bus drivers come to mind. If you were to wake up tomorrow and find yourself in a world where all the teachers, nurses, garbage collectors were gone, the results would be catastrophic. But the same can't be said about CEOs, hedge fund managers, corporate lawyers, consultants, various positions in finance, advertising, marketing, and so on, even though they are highly paid and respectable professions. In fact, as one testimony from a manager of technical support puts it, if I showed up on Monday and the building had disappeared, not only would society not care, I wouldn't either. Some of these jobs are so pointless that even if you stopped showing up to work for years, nobody would notice. Take this example of a civil servant in Spain who decided to stop showing up to work, yet were paid for 6 years straight. For at least 6 years, Joaquin Garcia, a Spanish civil servant, skipped work to study the writings of Jewish philosopher Baruch Spinoza. His absence was first noticed in 2010 when he was due to receive a medal for long service. His deputy began making inquiries that finally led to the discovery that he hasn't been in office for years. Although Garcia was eventually fined and faced consequences for his actions, his story made headlines in Spain. This was during a time when the country was undergoing severe austerity and unemployment, with at least 20% of the population being unemployed. So during a time where so many people were struggling to find a job, the fact that this man could just not show up to work for 6 years and still get paid caused quite a bit of public outrage. Having meaningless and pointless jobs that use up resources under any situation would be inefficient, but especially in a world where there are millions of people starving, living paychecks to paychecks, struggling to find a job, the very existence of these bullshit jobs is egregious. Finally, I would like to end this section by briefly touching on sexism. Sometimes when people hear about bullshit jobs, the first thing that they think of are lower level office positions that are commonly held by women and take the opportunity to be sexist because of course they do. So positions like receptionists, secretaries, and various administrative roles that are usually held by women are often seen as redundant. Now, not only is this argument sexist, but this also goes on to show the ignorance of how most offices work. This is also statistically incorrect. The YouGov poll that I mentioned earlier found that more men feel that their jobs are pointless compared to women, 42% compared to 32%. As Graeber points out, secretaries often end up doing 80% to 90% of their boss's jobs and sometimes 100% of its non-bullshit aspects. The reality is, at any given office, it is actually the women working as secretaries or receptionists or administrative assistants that do actual real work that is not bullshit, despite receiving very little credit or outright being dismissed as being redundant. So this is not just a matter of jobs being bullshit, but also a bullshit society that puts less value on women's labor. But honestly, this doesn't even start at the job. It starts way before. It starts before you can even get to the door. The grueling process of job hunting. You know, for me, the job itself is not even that stressful, but it's always the process of getting there, searching for a job that fills me up with dread. Getting a job has gone from something that you could just get with a firm handshake to an endless labyrinth of algorithms and machine learning that you have to hop through within a span of less than 20 years. Applying for a job online means that you'd be competing with thousands of other candidates, hurdling over algorithms and machine learning that are designed to reject your resume before any employer even gets a chance to read it. Honestly, looking for a job is a full-time job in and of itself.
60 applications for jobs that paid between minimum wage and $12 an hour. Holtz kept track of the responses and was surprised by the result.
16 of them responded to me. 4 of those went on to a phone call after an email exchange, and then 1 of those turned into an interview. 0 of them turned into a job that was actually desperate for help.
Now, there are millions of different resources out there that claim to make this process easier for you, from resume templates to cover letter tips, questions to ask in an interview, and so on. But none of this ever seem to address the elephant in the room, which is that the job market has been so rigged on the side of the employers for so long that some of these requirements are virtually impossible to meet. Take entry-level jobs that demand 3 to 5 years experience, for example. How is that going to work? If you already have 3 to 5 years experience in a field, then you're not entry level. You're already well established into your career. There is so much importance placed on experience. It is often the first thing that the employer asks about, which makes it difficult for anyone who is just starting out to get going unless you have connections. But the thing is, there actually is no correlation between the amount of experience and job performance. Yes, we are currently in nearly 30 years worth of research on this, with the earliest study done in 1995. More recent articles like this one from the Harvard Business Review found similar results. It's because at the end of the day, every job that you're going to have is going to be different. Even if you have years of experience, there are still new things that you need to learn, things that you need to be trained on, things that you need help with. On top of having impossible demands, the process of job hunting can also involve a series of endless interviews. So even after you've made it through the application process, now you could have as much as 3, 4, 5 or more rounds of interviews. This is bad for both the company and the candidates. As for the applicant, this process could be incredibly frustrating, and for the company, it could cause them to lose out on qualified candidates. The interview process could also involve doing arbitrary assessments, from personality tests to making entire projects. And after all that, the company could just ghost you, not even sending you a rejection letter. According to data collected by US Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average applicant could wait anywhere between 15 to 26 weeks from applying to jobs to receiving a job offer. So 26 weeks, over 6 months it can take from applying to jobs to actually getting one. By stretching out the application and interview process for this long, companies make sure that the only applicants that they can get are the desperate ones that would take anything. It also makes use of the sunk cost fallacy. Say if you've been investing everything into a job application for 1, 2, or even 3 months straight, it is unlikely that you'd move on even when it's beneficial because you have already invested so much into this. So by the time the company finally makes their decision and offers you a position, you'd be so frustrated and desperate that you'd take anything, even if it's offering lower pay, poor working conditions, rigid hours, and so on. Now, why would the company do this? Well, firstly, like I said, searching and applying for jobs is mostly done online now. Instead of going door to door with a printout of your resume, now you can apply to jobs with just a click of a button. While this certainly has made the process easier, it has also made it more competitive, as now you'd have to compete with a wide pool of candidates, thousands of people wanting to get the same job as you, making the process longer and more tedious than it has to be. Also, a lot of these hiring managers or recruiters have no idea how to do the job themselves, which leads to some of these jobs having an impossible list of requirements. Like, I remember seeing this job posting for a junior Carbon developer a while back that wanted 10 years of experience with the Carbon programming language. Now, I don't know where to even start with this one. The fact that they're wanting 10 years of experience for a junior developer position, or the fact that they're wanting 10 years of experience for a programming language that came out less than 2 years ago. Who the fuck is writing this? Another reason why a company might have an endless rigmarole when it comes to their hiring process is because they already have someone in mind they want to offer the position to, likely an internal candidate, as in someone who is already working at that company is being promoted to that position. There are some good reasons as to why a company might do this. There is a study done by the Cornell University showing that internal candidates tend to outperform the external hires because they've been with the company for longer, they know how things work around here. But as part of company policy or whatever, they might still need to look for external hires to fill that position. So to get around that, they intentionally make the requirements difficult to meet, just so they can say, oh, we couldn't find anybody that met all the requirements, so we're just going to go with someone from within the company. Also, there are a ton of companies out there that discriminate based on race, gender, age, ability, and so on. Racial discrimination when it comes to seeking employment has long been studied. There is a famous study that sent thousands of identical resumes to job applications, only changing the name of the applicant, and they found that simply having a white-sounding name makes you 50% more likely to be contacted for job interviews as opposed to having a black or an ethnic-sounding name. There is also another study done by the late sociologist Deva Paja that found that black applicants with a clean record have worse job outcomes than white applicants with a criminal record.
Looking first at the outcomes for white testers, we see that about 34% of whites with no criminal record received a callback or job offer, compared to just 17% of whites with a criminal record. So we see that a criminal record reduces employment opportunities by about 50%. In the case of black testers, 14% of those with no criminal background received a callback or job offer, relative to just 5% of blacks with a criminal record. When we compare the outcomes of the black and white testers side by side, what's most striking is the direct effect of race on the outcomes of these young men. A black applicant with no criminal background received callbacks or job offers at about half the rate of an equally qualified white applicant. But the most surprising finding was really related to blacks with no criminal background relative to whites with a felony conviction. We find that a white applicant with a felony conviction fared just as well, if not better, relative to a black applicant with a clean record. This suggests that being black in America today is essentially like having a felony conviction in terms of one's chances of finding employment.
But by dragging the hiring process through long applications and multiple rounds of interviews, they're able to pick on all of your flaws, nitpick every single thing about you. And through doing that, if they choose to discriminate, it would be less obvious. So the companies are essentially covering their asses and making sure they don't get hit with a discrimination lawsuit. The last thing that I want to talk about is how ableist this whole process is. At the job interview, for example, you have to make eye contact, read the room, say the right things at the right time. I remember applying for customer service roles a while ago, and as part of the application, one of them made me do assessments where you'd have to match facial expressions of people and write down what they're feeling and how you'd react. It is a lot for anybody to do, and as an allistic person, it is often too much for me even at times. So I can't even imagine what it's like for an autistic or neurodivergent person. A lot of autistic people do this thing called masking, where they essentially hide the signs of their autism and pretend to be neurotypical. But the thing is, in the context of job interviews, even neurotypical people have to put on an act. They have to pretend to be personable, friendly, qualified in order to sell themselves. So not only do autistic people have to pretend to be neurotypical, but they also have to pretend to be a neurotypical pretending to be corporate friendly. It's a lot, and honestly it exhausts me just by thinking about it, so I'm not going to comment too much on this. I would much rather have you listen to autistic creators who have made content on this. This video by Dana Anderson I thought was pretty good. We'll have it linked in the description. But can we just debrief for a moment, ground ourselves and ask, what are we really doing? Yes, we're applying for a job. For what? Some of us are looking for a career and meaning in life and all that kind of stuff for sure, but for most of us, we just want to pay our bills and make ends meet. Why do we have to do this much just to survive? What kind of perversity is this? And the worst part is, at some point in our society, we have accepted that this is okay, that this is normal, that this is how it's meant to be, to the point now you're the one that gets seen as crazy for even speaking up about this. So, you finally got the job. Great. Hard work pays off, right? Or does it? Despite how much our society preaches the virtue of hard work, the reality is hard work rarely ever works. Jobs that work the longest hours, teachers, nurses, cleaners, hospitality and retail workers, builders, construction workers, trades, are also some of the lowest paying jobs there is. On top of that, as Graeber writes in his essay, in our society, there seems to be a general rule that the more obviously one's work benefits other people, the less one is likely to be paid for it. Now, obviously, there are some exceptions to this. Doctors contribute immensely to our society, yet are paid a decent salary. Many physicists and engineers are paid well. Depending on where you live, like here in Australia, trades like plumbing or being an electrician are seen as respectable jobs that can pay really well. But if you go back to that thought experiment that I talked about earlier, about jobs that would cause the society to fall apart if they were to disappear, like teachers, nurses, and garbage collectors, the essential workers, almost all of those jobs are paid the least. As of making this video, UK has been under the rule of the British Conservative Tory party for over a decade, leading to austerity in the healthcare system, causing many nurses to turn to food banks just to make ends meet. Teachers all over the world have been striking for better pay. In 1968, when garbage collectors and sanitation workers went on strike in New York, the city caved into their demands in mere 10 days because it had become inhabitable. But on the other hand, jobs like CEOs, hedge fund managers, consultants, corporate lawyers, various roles in finance, advertising, marketing, jobs that you probably won't even notice if they were to vanish, are some of the highest paying jobs in our society. And this is not just a thought experiment. Stuff like this has happened before. In 2020, an entire country like Belgium ran without a government for over a year, 592 days to be exact, due to some constitutional crisis. So for over an entire year, Belgium had no prime minister, no minister for health, transportation, education, and the country was running fine without any noticeable effects in health, transportation, education, or other areas. Similarly, corporations like Uber went through a similar crisis after its former CEO, Travis Kalanick, resigned in 2017 due to being involved in a series of scandals that came to light. Following Kalanick's resignation, other executives also stepped down, leading Uber to run for over a month straight without a CEO, Chief Operating Officer, Chief Financial Officer, or Chief Marketing Officer, without any consequences to its day-to-day operations. Yet, these are the positions that get paid millions, if not billions of dollars. Uber's former CEO, Travis Kalanick, has a net worth of $3.6 billion, despite his presence having no noticeable impact in the company. Meanwhile, the drivers that keep Uber running have to use their own car, deal with shitty wages, unfair deactivations, take on all the risk, all while Uber can take away as much as 30% of your pay. It's an opposite world. There is no other way to put it. Honestly, this was one of the main reasons why it was so difficult for me to get started on this video. When I decided to make a video on the so-called bullshit jobs, as in jobs that are highly respected and pay extremely well but contribute little to nothing in society, I was at first reluctant because I personally have never done any of these jobs myself. Like, my last job was as a cleaner for a high-end hotel where I had to clean hotel rooms after the guest had left and prep it for the next new guest to come in. Being a high-end hotel, we had your typical rich, old money people come in that would wear Gucci flip-flops to bathroom, tourists, elderly couples enjoying their retirements, families with kids that would always leave a huge mess behind, but also the business people, as in people that were there with a briefcase for their business trips, for whom we had to keep an iron and an ironing board in every room. So I was in a position where I was able to observe these business people closely, and I kid you not, at most they did 2 or 3 hours of work a day, and for the remainder of the time they would just chill out in the bar downstairs or next to the swimming pool. So here I was working 7 to 8 hours a day, breaking my back having to clean entire rooms in less than half an hour. The agency that I worked for paid the hotel based on how many rooms were cleaned, but the hotel had to legally pay us by the hour. So if you were taking too long, if you went over by even just half an hour, you would have 3, 4, sometimes even 5 managers come after you. It was horrible. Like, on my last day, I just took my stuff and walked out. Didn't even bother saying goodbye to anybody. So in situations like this, it's hard not to get resentful when you're surrounded by all these rich business people that were getting paid for doing nothing. But despite all this, I didn't actually mind the job. Like, the job in and of itself was good. I liked how once I was done for the day, I was done. There was no after work emails for me to get back to, no answering machine to respond to, and most importantly, I had a purpose. I was making a difference. I knew what I was doing and I had a direct answer to the question, so what do you do? And many of these bullshit jobs lack exactly that.
What you do at Initech is you take the specifications from the customers and you bring them down to the software engineers.
Yes, that's right.
Well, then I just have to ask, why couldn't the customers just take them directly to the software people, huh?
Well, I'll tell you why. Because engineers are not good at dealing with customers.
So you physically take the specs from the customer?
Well, no, my secretary does that, or their fax.
So then you must physically bring them to the software people.
Well, no. Yeah, I mean, sometimes.
What would you say you do here?
Now, this is obviously not the case for every single one of these jobs. There are some jobs out there that are just pure bullshit, as in, on top of contributing nothing to society, they're also paid horribly. Around the end of Office Space, Peter and his friends Mike and Samir decide to take revenge on their company through installing a software that is meant to steal small, barely noticeable amounts of money from the company's account and have them transferred to a bank account that they owned. Except this goes horribly wrong and they end up stealing a lot more than they intended. While they kept fumbling around at Peter's apartment figuring out what to do, they hear a knock on the door from a former crack addict who is now selling magazines door to door to better his life. They invite him in, hoping with his previous criminal experience he would be able to help them with what they've gotten themselves into, except the crackhead wasn't really a crackhead. He was an unemployed software engineer who was selling magazines just to make ends meet.
You just give us the name of one drug dealer. I mean, I could talk to him. I have good networking skill.
I lied. All the stuff I said about being a crackhead just helps me sell magazines. I'm actually an unemployed software engineer.
You're a software engineer?
Yep.
Things, it must be very rough for you.
Actually, man, I make more money selling magazine subscriptions than I ever did in this road.
Now, obviously, this is exaggerated to an extent because, after all, this is a movie, it's a work of fiction appealing to satire. But there is some truth to this. In Graeber's book, for example, he shares the testimony from a former sex worker who is now a professor, claiming that sex work should have its own category when it comes to bullshit jobs. She goes on to say, if a sane woman can make 5 times as much money stripping as she could teaching as a world-recognized scholar, could not the stripping job be considered bullshit simply on that basis? While there obviously is nothing wrong with selling magazines or being a stripper, it does make you question some things. Mainly, what sort of society that we live in where being a software engineer or a scholar that undoubtedly takes much more effort to do, yet gets paid less than some of the lowest level jobs that is out there. Obviously, it is much more respected and admired to be a professor than it is to be a stripper, but that can only take you so far. After all, respect doesn't pay bills, it doesn't put food on the table. Ultimately, the main issue with all of this is that it goes directly against everything that we've been taught or conditioned to believe. Ever since we were young, many of us were told that hard work pays off. We were taught to follow the life script of going to school, then going to college or university, then getting a decent professional career job. We were taught that people that were successful in our society got there as a result of their merit and hard work. But things like this prove that it is not the case. It makes it painfully apparent that we've been lied to, and it is not a good feeling. That in reality, the world that we live in is upside down and it works opposite to everything that we've been told. So finally, the bullshit jobs. So what exactly are these bullshit jobs? After his 2013 essay went viral, Graeber received hundreds if not thousands of testimonials from people all over the world who resonated with his essay. After compiling all of these testimonials, as well as additional content produced on a number of blogs, newspapers, and online discussion forums, he was able to break down the types of bullshit jobs into 5 categories. The first category is what he calls the flunkies. Flunkies are defined as jobs that exist only or primarily to make someone else look or feel important. So these are your receptionists, secretaries, administrative assistants, primarily the roles that are held by women at any given office. Because they simply exist to make somebody else seem important, no one really cares if they actually do anything. As one testimony puts it, the only full-time job I've ever had in human resources in a private sector engineering firm was wholly not necessary. It was there only because the HR specialist was lazy and didn't want to leave his desk. I was an HR assistant. My job took, I shit you know, 1 hour a day, an hour and a half max. The other 7 or so hours were spent playing 2048 or watching YouTube. Phone never rang. Data was entered in 5 minutes or less. I got paid to be bored. My boss could have easily done my job, yet again, fucking lazy turd. Graeber goes on to explain how as an organization grows in size, the more managers and higher-ups you have, the importance of these higher-ups would be measured by how many people are working under them, which creates an incentive to hire employees and then decide what you want to do with them as opposed to the other way around. Because after all, you need flunkies to maintain your position of power. I mean, without flunkies, who exactly are you superior to? The next category is the goons. Goons are defined as people whose jobs have an aggressive element, but crucially who exist only because other people employ them. Say, armed forces. You need armed forces because other countries have armed forces. The same can be said about lobbyists, PR specialists, consultants, corporate lawyers, telemarketers. The only reason why your company needs them is because other companies, your competitive company, has them, so you gotta have them too. But what differentiates the goons from the flunkies is really the aggressive element of their job. While the flunkies can just chill out and not do anything because their only job is to make somebody else look important, the goons have to go out of their way to make other people's lives miserable. Telemarketers are a good example of this. I think we all can agree that if all telemarketers were to vanish tomorrow, the world would be a better place. And many telemarketers feel the same way too. As one testimony puts it, our call center's resources are almost wholly devoted to coaching agents on how to talk people into things they don't need, as opposed to solving the real problems they're calling about. Reba sums up the role of goons as being forced against your better nature to try to convince others to do things that defy their common sense is at the very heart of what it is to be a goon. Next are the duct tapers. Duct tapers are employees whose jobs exist only because of a glitch or fault in the organization, who are there to solve a problem that ought not to exist. These kinds of jobs are more prevalent in tech and are commonly delegated to software engineers or programmers. As the Graeber puts it, there seems to be a whole genre of jobs that involve correcting the damage done by a superior who holds his positions for reasons unrelated to ability to do the work. And that is where the duct tapers come in, to undo the damage done by sloppy or incompetent superiors. One testimony comes from a programmer working for a firm run by a Viennese psychologist. The company's founding genius was this Viennese research psychologist who claimed to have discovered the algorithm. For many months, I was never allowed to see it. I just wrote stuff that used it. The psychologist's code kept failing to give sensible results. Typical cycle. I demonstrate his code box on a ridiculously basic sentence. He'd wear a confused frown. Oh, how strange. Like I just discovered the Death Star's one tiny weakness. He'd disappear into his cave for 2 hours. Triumphantly emerges with bug fix. Now it's perfect. Go to step 1. For other duct tapers, their job involves working around a glitch that can very easily be fixed, but nobody has bothered to do so, or doing tasks that can be very easily automated. As another testimony puts it, I was given one responsibility, watching an inbox that received emails in a certain form from employees in the company asking for tech help, and copy and paste it into a different form. Not only was this a textbook example of an automatable job, it actually used to be automated. There was some kind of disagreement between various managers that led to higher-ups issuing a standardization that nullified the automation. Graeber sums up the role of the duct tapers with this analogy. It's as if a homeowner, upon discovering a leak in the roof, decided it was too much bother to hire a roofer to reshingle it and instead stuck a bucket underneath and hired someone whose full-time job was to periodically dump the water. As you can probably imagine, duct tapers are almost always aware of the fact that they have a bullshit job and they absolutely hate it. Next, we have the box tickers. Box tickers are employees who exist only or primarily to allow an organization to be able to claim it is doing something that in fact it is not doing. This can involve creating surveys, then making reports and presentations based on those surveys without actually implementing any changes. These sorts of reports are treated as something really important, even though most people don't even read them or have any use of them in any way. But this can go hand in hand with the role of the flunkies, as oftentimes all these reports do is make the boss or the people at the higher ups seem important. As Graeber says, if the ongoing importance of a manager is measured by how many people he has working under him, the immediate material manifestation of that manager's power and prestige is the visual quality of his presentations and reports. These reports also serve a function. If the company gets sued for something, then they could just pull out a report or two to cover their asses. Graeber shares an anecdote from his experience as an academic back when he was working at the University of Chicago's Science Library. According to him, at least 90% of what people did back there was photocopy and mail out articles from medical journals and send them to lawyers. He explains, if you're suing a doctor for malpractice, part of the show involves assembling an impressive pile of scientific papers to plunk down on the table at an appropriately theatrical moment and then enter into evidence. While everyone knows that no one will actually read these papers, there is always the possibility that the defense attorney or one of his expert witnesses might pick one up at random for inspection, so it is considered important to ensure your legal aid to locate articles that can at least possibly be said to bear in some way on the case. What makes box tickers a bullshit job is that all these reports and presentations that they spend hours or probably even days making, no one reads them all the way through or read them at all. Just like the flunkies, they're mostly for show. They're mostly there for the company to say that they have done something that they really haven't done. The last category is the taskmasters. Now, taskmasters fall under two subcategories. Type 1 taskmaster contains those whose role consists entirely of assigning work to others. This mainly consists of middle managers and would be considered bullshit if there really is no need for you to be there, as in the team that you're managing know what they're doing and can run themselves on their own. As one testimony from a middle manager puts it, I just got promoted to this job and I spent a lot of my time looking around and wondering what I'm supposed to be doing. The Type 2 taskmasters create bullshit tasks for others to do, supervise bullshit, or even create entirely new bullshit jobs. So these are the people that hire the duct tapers, the goons, the flunkies, the box tickers. As you can probably tell, most of these taskmasters are managers, bosses, or people that are at the higher up positions at a company who are less likely to complain and admit what they're really doing. But LuKremBo still managed to get testimonials from two former managers. One of them stated, "It is not capitalism per se that produces the bullshit. It is managerialist ideologies put into practice in complex organizations. As managerialism embeds itself, you get entire cadres of staff whose job it is just to keep the managerialist plates spinning, strategies, performance targets, audits, reviews, appraisals, renewed strategies, etc." It's important to note that these 5 categories are not set in stone. There could be some more categories of bullshit jobs. There could be some bullshit jobs that are a mixture of multiple of these categories, like flunky and box ticker that I mentioned earlier. But at this point, some of you are probably confused as to what exactly is the problem with these bullshit jobs. I mean, yeah, they're pointless and they serve no purpose and contribute little to nothing in this world. But most people that do these jobs are still respected and are paid really well for essentially doing nothing, especially if you're anything like me who has only done sort of low-level hospitality, retail, cleaning jobs all your life. This sounds like a dream. But many of these people that do these bullshit jobs are confused themselves as to why they are so unhappy. Because as far as everybody else is concerned, they have made it. They have a respectable job that pays well where they don't have to do much. In LuKremBo's book, many spoke of the dissonance between having fancy, impressive-sounding job titles but doing so little in reality. Some feel an immense level of guilt for being paid so much for doing so little, especially if they have people in their lives who work a lot harder yet are paid nowhere near as much. Ultimately, the unhappiness that many that are stuck in these bullshit jobs feel stem from a lack of purpose. As one testimony from a corporate lawyer here in Sydney puts it, "I contribute nothing to this world and am utterly miserable all of the time." In a world where millions of people are living paychecks to paychecks, barely making ends meet, struggling to meet their basic necessities, complaining about something like lack of purpose might seem out of touch. But LuKremBo argues that having that sense of purpose, feeling that you're making a difference in this world is just as important. And having that being stripped away from you is not just an assault on the person's sense of self-importance, but also a direct attack on the very foundations of the sense that one even is a self. There is so much evidence on this. There are studies that show that people who win the lottery and become multimillionaires tend to keep working. As high as 62% of them keep their jobs. Inmates in prison who voluntarily choose to work even in instances where the work doesn't pay. Even after the abolition of slavery, many of the freed slaves continue to work under their former slave masters as employees. Lottery winners, prisoners, newly freed slaves, these people don't need to work, yet oftentimes they still choose to because it gives them meaning and a sense of purpose, which is vital to a person's identity. Reber references the work of German psychologist Karl Gruss, who in 1901 wanted to explore why humans play games, why do they get so invested in the outcome even when it doesn't make a difference outside of the confines of the game itself. What he found was that infants express extraordinary levels of happiness when they first discover that they can make a difference in this world, even if it's something as small as moving a pencil. Thus, Gruss coined the phrase, the pleasure at being the cause, where children come to understand that they exist, that they're discrete entities separate from the world around them, largely by coming to understand that they are the thing which just caused something to happen, the proof of which is the fact that they can make it happen again. So after knowing all this, it's not difficult to see as to why so many of these people that are stuck in these meaningless bullshit jobs are so miserable. And it doesn't help the fact that in the Western world at least, we have been conditioned, have been drilled into our minds since we were young, that our work should be the thing that should give meaning to our lives, that should define our identity, our purpose. But how is your work supposed to give you meaning when your work has no meaning? As one testimony from a project manager puts it, I get most of the meaning in my life from my job, and now my job has no meaning or purpose. On top of all this, people that are stuck in these jobs have to pretend that they're doing something more important than they actually are. They have to pretend to be working, pretend to be busy. So not only you have no purpose, but you're not even allowed to complain about it. Reber calls it the infuriating ambiguity, where you know that there is something terrible, ridiculous, outrageous going on, but it's not clear whether you are even allowed to acknowledge it, and it's usually even less clear who or what can be blamed. Because these jobs demand so little, the actual task that you do end up doing gets nitpicked to an extraordinary level. Take this testimony from an employee working at a medical firm. I made one highlighting error consistently during the first 2 weeks of employment. I learned this was wrong and immediately corrected it. However, for the entire remainder of my time at this company, every time someone found one of these mishighlighted forms, I would be pulled aside to talk about it. Every time, like it was a new issue. Every time, like the manager didn't know these were all done during the same period and it wasn't happening anymore, even though I told her every time.
We have sort of a problem here. Yeah, you apparently didn't put one of the new cover sheets on your TPS reports.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry about that. I forgot.
Yeah. You see, we're putting the cover sheets on all TPS reports now before they go out. Did you see the memo about this?
Yeah. Yeah, I have the memo right here. I just, forgot. But, it's not shipping out till tomorrow, so there's no problem.
Yeah. If you could just go ahead and make sure you do that from now on, that would be great. And, I'll go ahead and make sure you get another copy of that memo. Okay?
Yeah, no, I have the memo. I've got it. It's right.
Hello, Phil.
In some cases, when there is no work for the employees to do, the employers would make up pointless, degrading tasks just to pass time. Take this testimony from a receptionist. One of the ad salespeople came to my desk and dumped thousands of paper clips on my desk and asked me to sort them by color. I thought she was joking, but she wasn't. I did it only to observe that she then used them interchangeably without the slightest attention to the color of the clip. I personally can't think of anything more degrading. At least my cleaning job I was able to get without any experience or qualifications. Keep in mind, a lot of these people are extremely qualified, have years of experience under their belt, connections with people in the industry. Imagine doing all that just to sort out thousands of paper clips by color. This lack of purpose, combined with the inability to do anything about it, causes people to lash out over arbitrary things. Something as little as a printer jam starts to get on your nerves.
PC load letter? What the fuck does that mean?
Because you have so little power, you try to gain control by getting possessive and protective over trivial things like a stapler. In reality, you are always on edge, barely holding on the verge of a breakdown.
Boy, I tell you, some days, one of these days it's just gonna be like...
And yeah, like I said, these jobs are respected in society and pay enough to be able to take care of yourself and your family, but as cheesy as it sounds, What's the point if you're not even happy? Is this really worth having your basic sense of self getting stripped away from you? Is this really worth waking up every morning 5 days a week for the rest of your life? Why are we even doing this? Why is this happening? If there's one thing that's certain, is that this sort of work arrangement and political landscape foster resentment. Those that are unemployed resent the employed. Those that are employed are told to resent the unemployed, as they're constantly labeled as leechers and freeloaders. Those that are stuck in bullshit jobs resent those that actually get to do meaningful work that gives them purpose. And those that do those meaningful work are oftentimes paid and treated poorly, causing them to resent those who get paid for doing nothing. It's just a miserable way to live for everybody involved. But while it's obvious as to why a cleaner like me might resent those posh business people, the other way around doesn't make much sense at first. Like, why would a manager resent those working under them? To explain this, Graeber coins the term moral envy, which he defines as feelings of envy and resentment directed at another person, not because that person is wealthy or gifted or lucky, but because his or her behavior is seen as upholding a higher moral standard than the envier's own. Think of the way some people get so unnecessarily hostile and aggressive when you tell them that you're a vegan. Now, as a vegan myself, I can tell you that some vegans do tend to be overly preachy and cultish, but I'll still say that a vast majority of hostility that vegans face is due to moral envy. Vegans are attempting to live a lifestyle that minimizes cruelty as much as possible, there is no denying that, and that behavior is upholding a higher moral standard that triggers some people. There's this video from the channel Innuendo Studios run by Ian Danskin titled Why Are You So Angry? Part 2 Angry Jack, where at the start, Danskin talks about environmentalist Colin Bevan, who decided to live an entire year making zero impact on the environment. Him and his family shut off power in their apartment, bought only local food, washed their clothes in their bathtub by foot. The documentary No Impact Man shares their experience, as well as a book that he wrote by the same name. When Bevan announced that him and his family would be doing this experiment on their blog that they ran on a laptop powered by a solar cell, they were subjected to a lot of hate. Not from conservative right-wing people that deny climate change, but from other environmentalists.
I can't wait to wipe my ass with this book. My first impulse was to rake these people with Uzi fire while screaming, "Is that enough impact for you?" Because I've also got emails from some environmentalists that say, you know, crazy people like you give the rest of us a bad name.
Now, Bevan's decision to do this doesn't impact anybody aside from him and his family, that's kind of the whole point, but again, it's the moral envy that was triggered from other environmentalists. Bevan is living in a way that is upholding a higher moral standard, that even the people who share the same goals as him can agree on, but is unable to do so for whatever reason. This projection from other environmentalists is manifested as envy. While moral envy is something that is more apparent in activist circles like environmentalist and animal rights activists, Graeber suggests that it is more subtly present at work as well. The reason why teachers, nurses, or auto workers are paid so little compared to, say, corporate lawyers or hedge fund managers is precisely because their work so clearly benefits the society. A manager might be resentful or even envious of their workers because their work is actually meaningful and serves a purpose. People who have bullshit jobs envy those whose work has a purpose, even if they're worse off or are below them in the so-called social ladder. As of making this video, auto workers have just come off strike last October. Auto workers make cars, therefore their contribution to American culture and lifestyle is undeniable. And that is precisely what people who are stuck in these bullshit jobs are envious of. After all, they get to make cars. Shouldn't that be enough for them? I have to sit around filling out stupid forms all day, and these bastards want to rub it in by threatening to go on strike to demand a dental plan or 2 weeks off to take their kids to see the Grand Canyon or the Colosseum on top of that? Because after all, nobody is going to call you up in 20 years being like, thank you for being such a wonderful insurance marketing coordinator. You have saved my life, like you probably would for a teacher, a nurse, or a doctor. This promotes the idea that the more your work benefits the society, the less you deserve to get paid for it, that the virtue of your work should be its own reward. Whereas the less your work benefits the society, the more you should get paid for it, because your suffering through something pointless and meaningless deserves its own reward. But this still doesn't explain as to why these bullshit jobs exist in the first place. Back in the 90s, under the Clinton administration, when globalization policies were put in place, most of the manufacturing and producing jobs were either automated or sourced overseas. While this caused the distribution of labor in the agricultural sector to go down, labor in the service sector went up. When most of us think of service jobs, we probably think of someone making coffee or any types of hospitality role. Now, obviously, the country's economy is not being built upon hospitality workers. So in 1992, it was suggested that it would be more useful to define it as information work. Adding another component of information made a drastic difference. This part of the service sector that included administrators, consultants, clerical and accounting staff, IT professionals, that is the one that was really increasing. And this is also where the bullshit jobs proliferate. Weber refers to the FIRE sector of the economy, which stands for finance, insurance, and real estate. Businesses that make up the FIRE economy include banks, hedge funds, insurance agencies, mortgage brokers, real estate agencies, and so on. As you can probably guess, many companies, tech companies especially, are funded by the FIRE sector. As Graeber explains that the entire FIRE sector basically creates money by making loans and then moves it around in often extremely complicated ways, extracting another small cut with every transaction. So because you're getting a cut at every transaction, the way to maximize profit is to have as many cuts as possible by moving around the money as inefficiently as you can. To quote Graeber, when a profit-seeking enterprise is in the business of distributing a very large sum of money, the most profitable thing for it to do is to be as inefficient as possible. And this is the reason why these companies end up creating all these pointless bullshit jobs, because inefficiency is the point. This is how all these companies end up having so many managers, middle managers. Oftentimes the number of managers would be equal or more than that of employees, because the longer the process takes, the greater the excuse for the endless multiplication of intermediary positions, and the more money is siphoned off before it has any chance to get to those doing the actual work. This process of having all these managers is what Graeber calls managerial feudalism. To explain this, let's look at an example from a French tea factory. So originally this particular tea factory was a local enterprise, then it was bought by the owner of Lipton, the world's largest tea producer. Afterwards, as the testimony from one of their employees puts it, they started hiring more and more white-collar workers. Originally, when I started working here, there were just two of them, the boss and the HR guy. It had been like that for years. Now suddenly there were 3, 4, 5, 7 guys in suits wandering around. The company made up different fancy titles for them, but basically all of them spent their time trying to think of something to do. They would be walking up and down the catwalks every day, staring at us, scribbling notes while we worked. Then they have meetings and discuss it and write reports, but they still couldn't figure out any real excuse for their existence.
And here's something else, Bob. I have 8 different bosses right now.
I beg your pardon?
8 bosses.
8?
8, Bob. So that means that when I make a mistake, I have 8 different people coming by to tell me about it. That's my only real motivation, is not to be hassled. That and the fear of losing my job. But you know, Bob, that'll only make someone work just hard enough not to get fired.
Initially, those managers were hired to improve productivity and efficiency. But in this case, the employees were already as productive and efficient as they could be, but these managers, these white-collar workers, were still hired. If anything, productivity as a whole has been steadily increasing, while wages and hourly compensation remain the same. Instead, the profits from this increased productivity have been going in the pockets of the wealthiest 1%, the investors, executives, upper management, as well as hiring and creating these new and pointless managerial positions. To quote Graeber again, In any political economic system based on appropriation and distribution of goods rather than actually making, moving, or maintaining them, and therefore where a substantial portion of the population is engaged in funneling resources up and down the system, that portion of the population will tend to organize itself into an elaborately ranked hierarchy of multiple tiers, at least 3 and sometimes 10, 12, or even more. Therefore, the reason for this kind of arrangement is not economical or even efficiency, it's cultural and political. It's work for the sake of working. It's taking pride in the fact that you're working 40 or even 50 hours a week, even if you're not actually doing anything. It's not even productive work, it's work as an end and meaning in itself. And there are good reasons as to why they want to keep us working, even if it's utterly pointless bullshit work. As Graeber quotes George Orwell, this instinct to perpetuate useless work is at bottom simply fear of the mob. The mob are such low animals that they would be dangerous if they had leisure. It is safer to keep them too busy to think. One of the main problems that I have with films like Office Space or Fight Club is that all throughout the film they'll have this build-up where they would raise some very valid critiques of society, whether it be about consumerism, work culture. They'll have this steady build-up, but when it comes to actually doing something about these issues, they'll do something stupid like install a faulty software or blow up buildings for no apparent reason. This perpetuates the idea that no matter how bad things are, no matter how legitimate these societal issues may be, there are no viable solutions. Therefore, the best that we can do is just suck it up and let things be, because this is as good as things can get. But the truth is, there are viable solutions. There are effective ways to change things. But the problem is that those solutions go against the mainstream and are more aligned with leftist or socialist policies. Graeber, for instance, is a huge advocate for universal basic income or UBI, where everyone receives a same amount of minimum income with no strings attached. He mentions the UBI pilot study done in India, where once everyone received the same amount of money, the inequalities in society slowly began to fade away. Girls were given the same amount of food as boys, unlike before. Disabled people were more accepted in village activities, and young women dropped the social convention that said they were supposed to be shy and modest and started hanging around in public like boys. Girls started participating in public life. Money has a symbolic power, and when it is the same for everybody, society as a whole becomes more equal. As Graeber states, even the modest basic income program could become a stepping stone toward the most profound transformation of all, to unlatch work from livelihood entirely. Other solutions include unionizing your workplace, decentering work, and instead seeking out meaning from other parts of your life. I'm not going to go into them too much because if you're somebody that is still watching, you probably already know about this. But what I am hoping to do with this video is to at least open up a dialogue, for us to be really honest about work and how we really feel about it, and have a conversation. And so far, people have already been doing it. The pandemic, in which thousands of employees were forced to work from home, really exposed as to how bullshit some of these jobs are. Turns out you really don't need 8 hours, 5 different managers hovering over you just to get a couple hours worth of work done. And obviously some people are not happy with it, but at least it started a discussion as to how pointless some of these jobs are. And of course, this conversation goes beyond just jobs. There is also the housing crisis, inflation, and all sorts of other issues. But in this video, I decided to focus on the job because that is where it all starts, right? If you don't have a job, you can't afford food, shelter, and other basic necessities, and everything else just falls apart. But if it makes you feel any better, this is not just an American thing. This is not a UK thing, and it's not even an Australian thing. As you can probably tell by the examples I provided, this is a worldwide thing. People from all over the world are dealing with housing crisis, inflation, shitty jobs, and people of my generation that are just starting their lives are facing the brunt of it. During the research for this video, I came across this street interview about the cost of living in South Korea, and it's pretty much the same there. You know, they may be speaking a different language, but they're essentially saying the same thing.
서울에서 집을 사는데 돈이 그러면 대체적으로 얼마나 든다고 생각하시나요?
왜? 와, 저는 솔직히 죽을 때까지 집 살 생각 못 하는 건데. 제가 봐둔 데가 있었는데 저 집도 아니에요. 그냥 오피스텔 한 칸을 제가 사고 싶었는데 그때가 4년 전인데 아마도 9억 7천만 원인데 그게 8평이었어요. 친구들이랑 요즘 이런 얘기를 많이 하거든요. 집에 살 수 있을까? 집에 살 수 있을까? 지금 제 또래 친구들이랑 제 동생 친구들은 이제 딱히 집은 중요하지 않다. 그냥 우리는 매달 렌트값을 낼 정도의 경제력만 갖추고 노후를 준비하자가. 그래서 저는 물가 상승이 약간 이런 인력난을 만들었는데 정부에서 저희는 젊은 애들은 일을 안 하고 싶다. 특히 우리나라 애들은 뭐 이런 거 고생하는 거 안 하잖아 이러는데 저는 이거 시급 문제도 어느 정도 있다고 봐요.
So that's pretty much it from me for today. Thanks for watching, especially if you made it till the end. This was a long one, but I would love to know what you think. I don't know how this year is going to go in terms of content. I guess I'll just be putting out videos as much as I can. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will hopefully see you in my next one. Bye!